Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is The Jeff Crilley Show.
So the stereotype is you get involved in philanthropy after you've made your millions and you're retiring and you have time on your hands. But there's another group, and it's coming on like a firestorm. It's young people getting involved in philanthropy. To talk about that right now, Amit and Dave Banerjee with Philanthropy Kids. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
Well, Amit, let's start with you. How did this all begin?
So at our dinner table conversations back home, my parents were always telling us, be kind, be respectful, be considerate of others. So the value of, kindness and generosity was instilled in us very early on. But we were also involved in programs like the Boy Scouts of America, and we learned a lot about doing a good turn daily and being trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, and so on and so on. And when I was in 4th grade, I was in a program called PAVE, which stood for Philanthropy and Volunteerism in Education. And that's where I learned what philanthropy meant and how I, as an 8-year-old at the time, could be an effective philanthropist. And I learned that the word philanthropy means the love of mankind. Anything that you do to show that emotion is philanthropy. And so years went on, I was working on my Eagle Scout project, and I created Philanthropy Kids magazine, a magazine that highlighted the stories of kids doing good for others. Eventually, that organization evolved into Philanthropy Kids, which now has digital publications, education programs, and writing initiatives and literacy initiatives for others.
So, Dave, let's bring you into this. You're watching your older brother do this. Are you thinking to yourself, that's his thing, that's not my thing, or are you thinking, I can't wait to get involved?
Yeah, so as my brother said, it's almost like a family thing, philanthropy, and seeing how much of a difference my brother could make, it made me realize that I could be like him too, and he's been such a great role model for me, and I truly love him.
That's awesome. That's really cool. We've got a little video of you as you're working on your Eagle project, and we're going to roll some of that right now, and maybe you can narrate what event was this?
So back in 2012, we actually released the first edition of Philanthropy Kids magazine. We did an all-call to the community, reached out to people in our personal networks and said, if you know of a kid who's doing good for others, submit your story. We want to highlight them. These are some of the pictures of some Boy Scout volunteers who actually were the first iteration of our editorial team. They were going through hundreds of articles and trying to condense them into the magazine that we saw. And then the other pictures you see here are images from our launch party. We invited people from the Boy Scouts community. It was actually held at the Circle 10 Council's headquarters. And we invited everyone who submitted a story was invited. We had our principal donors and supporters come and give presentations, such as Bobby Lyle and Bob Hopkins, who were kind of big community leaders who, helped us bring this to fruition.
Very cool. And I want to make note that the 3 of us are all Eagle Scouts, which is rare. It's like 1 in 1,000 Scouts end up going on for their Eagle. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
That's awesome. Well, you both shared with me before the show one of your favorite stories of a young person doing good. Amit, let's start with you. What story did you just share?
So one of the stories that we actually were able to highlight in our first issue was a story about a kid who was in 3rd or 4th grade at the time, and he noticed that there was a new kid at school who was sitting alone at lunch, who was playing alone at the playground during recess, and he realized that as a new kid, he didn't really have any friends at school. And so he took it upon himself to introduce him to the entire class as his friend, introduce him to his friend group and say, this kid is going to play with us and be a part of our, life as students. And so he really took it upon himself to be a philanthropist, show that love of mankind, and really, as a very young kid, express kindness and inclusiveness with someone who he barely knew.
That is inspiring. Dave, how about you?
Yeah, so one of my friends in high school, he's the president of like the volunteering organization at our school, and he wanted to he wanted to make a difference in the health of people, and so he got in touch with this organization called Carter Blood Care, and so he actually hosted 4 different blood drives where he was able to collect over 120 pints of blood. And so, he was able to save so many lives, and, that's just another kid making a big difference in the community.
I think that's awesome. Do you find that most kids, they might have a good idea, but they're not acting on it, and they need permission from somebody like you to say, just go for it? You don't have to wait to start a nonprofit or even just do some volunteer work, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, all kids, everyone is a good person, and we want to do good for the community. But the thing is, we just sometimes don't know where to start. And that's kind of what my brother and I are trying to do with Philanthropy Kids. We want to show to kids that you can make a difference. As a child, you can be a philanthropist. That word philanthropy isn't reserved just for old people with $1 billion, right? You don't need $1 billion to make a difference in your community, as we've seen from their examples of students making a difference. And yeah, we just want to empower these kids to, pursue philanthropy.
And I know this weekend you guys are going to be busy with a program. Why don't you talk about that, Amit?
Yeah, so this weekend we're actually going to be hosting a virtual conference called the Youth in Philanthropy Conference. And it's a partnership between 3 organizations, Philanthropy Kids, Paper for Water, and the Center Vision Leadership Foundation. We're going to bring in kids all over the globe to come learn about what it takes to be a young philanthropist and a young leader in the philanthropic community from people who've in some ways or another have made it in that community. My brother and I are going to be presenting to a group of students, and there are going to be other young leaders who are going to share their stories and kind of help guide people who are eager to do the same.
Yeah. Well, have you found, since you've been doing this now for several years, have you found that the momentum is building? Are there more kids wanting to do good than ever before?
So I think we have a program. I mentioned earlier PAVE, Philanthropy and Volunteerism in Education. The founder of PAVE actually reached out to us in 2013 and said, we want Philanthropy Kids to take over PAVE, but we want to incorporate social entrepreneurship into it and rename the program Philanthropy and Volunteerism in Entrepreneurship. And since then, we've taught kids what philanthropy is, why it's important, and how they can be a philanthropist and a social entrepreneur through leadership skills, communication skills, and just learning about their communities and the causes that are there. And our students have just been so receptive to this, the content that we're sharing with them. They're realizing that, yes, homelessness is such a big issue, hunger is such a big issue, and even tougher concepts like domestic violence and racism. We're addressing those topics and helping these students identify tangible ways for them to get involved. So these kids are finding things that they're passionate about in terms of causes, and then they're linking them up with other interests and passions that they have, and creating service projects and fundraising initiatives and even full-out organizations to help fulfill those needs. And so we're always impressed to see how these kids are taking the initiative upon themselves to be philanthropists.
Outstanding. Well, we're almost out of time, so Dave, I'll give you the final word. What thought do you want to give people as they're watching this?
Yeah, and what I want to say is that no matter how old you are, no matter how much money you have, you can make a difference. And just going out there and spending time volunteering is one of the best ways you can get involved. And yeah.
That's outstanding. So we're going to put up a couple of websites. We'll start with you. Your website is philanthropykids.org. Put that on the screen there. And then the group that you're working with this weekend, philanthropymisunderstood.org, is how people can get plugged into the conference.
Yes, so they can buy their tickets through philanthropymisunderstood.org for this Saturday. The conference is going to be from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central Time.
Outstanding. Well, you guys have been great guests, and thank you for your service.
Thank you for
thanks so
having
much
us.
for having us.
You bet. And that's it for now. We'll see you next time.